Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The Taliban has announced the formation of a caretaker government with Mullah Mohammad Hassan Akhund named as acting prime minister. The new government says it is aimed at ensuring lasting peace, prosperity and development, according to Taliban's supreme leader Haibatullah Akhundzada. So what is the makeup of the new government? How is the world responding? And can it rebuild this war-torn country to help its millions who are facing a possible food crisis and respond effectively to many other challenges? To find out more, I'm joined by Professor Joseph Gregory Mahoney from East China Normal University, Mullah Mohammad Hassan, research fellow at the Belt and Road Strategy Institute of Tsinghua University, Professor Faiz Zaland from Kabul University, and later by Wang Jin, associate professor at the Northwest University of China. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Well, Zong, I want to start with you. Now we have this, major post being filled up by the political figures of the new caretaker or interim government in Kabul. What do you make of this new government?
Firstly, Chinduo, thank you for having me on the program. Well, I think the most important word right now in this government setup is that it is a caretaker government. It is an interim arrangement. And of course, it is not, we are all envisioning in Afghanistan, we are hopeful that the eventual process of building a government, that is inclusive is something desirable for all countries in the region and especially for Afghans. But at the same time, the pressure on the Taliban since weeks now has been mounting. Who are they? Who represents them? Who are the key people that other countries will be talking to? They are keen to get support from the international community on the one hand, and for that there needs to be a face to the government. So this is one reason that it was very important to proactively form a basic setup of people that have long supported the process that they have gone through for the last 20 years. And secondly, basic functions of governance, for instance, the police, basic people that will make the society functional, that will make sure that there is no disarray. We know that right now there are many elements in Afghanistan, so to have a basic structure that can guarantee that a stable system can be in place to some extent. But most importantly, this is just the beginning. This is not the final phase of the government, and the Taliban have time and again in these past weeks consistently stated that they want an inclusive government. They are in talks with other segments of the Afghan society. So that is definitely in the long run, in the coming weeks, days, months maybe, we will see more inclusion. This is what the communication is so far. But that said, the need to have basic representation, a face in Kabul, people that represent and that can put everything they need in action was necessary. So this seems to be the reason why we have this structure so soon announced right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Mahoney from the U.S., what is the response, from the U.S. and what do you think of this new government? Some say, they see conservative hardline figures in a key position. Somehow Taliban is ignoring the concern, about recognition by the international community. Do you agree with that kind of a view?
I think what we're seeing in this government is a reflection of political reality. I think close students of politics, they know that real politics is never really driven by ideology or promises. It's driven by what are the real politics within this organization? Who are the people who have actual power? Who are the leaders of different groups and factions? And how are they jockeying for position? And how is the movement going to hold itself together and reflect those pressing needs? I think that that's the first issue that we've seen. And secondly, I don't think the Taliban really, that their first concern is responding to U.S. expectations of who their leaders should be, although the U.S. government has been very clear about who they would prefer, with the Deputy Prime Minister having pushed Pakistan to release him from prison and having negotiated with him. I think it's also clear that within the Taliban movement, they could not have put him in the first position, or that would have perhaps delegitimized their government. It would have made it look like the Taliban were in some way pandering to or still allowing the U.S. to choose who was going to lead Afghanistan. That and finally, as the Taliban said, this is an interim government, but maybe we wanted to be more inclusive, but we were struggling to deal with real politics, and we needed to get something going, given the crises, the mounting crises that Afghanistan is facing, and so here we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, Professor Zaland, you are based in Kabul. So is this the government you expected? And what is the response from the public, like in Kabul, in Afghanistan?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think Taliban were ousted from power for past 20 years. After they got back to Kabul, and Kabul suddenly, unexpectedly fallen into their hands, there were rumors that Taliban might not be able to announce soon a government, or they might have a problem of inclusivity, or they might have internal fissures. So within a haste, within a quick step, just to manage the day-to-day activities in the city and also across the country, do public services, manage the public services, and also pave a way to a new government, which will be after the caretaker government, based on a new constitution. I think this is what we expected. This is what Taliban were supposed to do, because to take over the power, to look after the processes upcoming, to have control over the country security-wise and public service-wise, they have brought their strong people, their strong personalities into the cabinet. And the government, yesterday it has been announced. People feel very comfortable. Today we had a very big gathering in nearby province in Logar. I just came from there. People are very much comfortable. They think it's a good start. Soon there will be a way for new constitution. Once the new constitution jargon is called, there I think everybody will try their best, all the political parties, civil societies, tribal elders, to manage a new constitution based on the expectations of the real expectation of the country.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good start. Zone, one thing, one feature of the new government people pays a lot of attention to is or rather the absence of women from the cabinet post. But Taliban did promise that women can come back and work for the government, probably, but no guarantee for the cabinet post, maybe at the lower post. What do you make of that?
Chindo, the conversation on women's inclusion, women's rights, and greater participation of women, especially in governance, is something that the entire SCO region is completely involved in. I think it is also important to understand that in these past 20 years, whereas we did see some progress in communities that were relatively privileged, overall women's progress needs a lot of work. Women need to be included, encouraged to receive an education. And for the Taliban, I think firstly they understand that the baggage of that previous period, if they continue that path, it will not be good for the progress that they need and for the recognition that they need for their country. And a big question mark over there is how they will include women. How will they encourage women's participation and increased role? Of course, they say that they want to follow Sharia, which many Muslim countries do, and the interpretation of Sharia varies in different countries. But I do think that given that the Taliban have communicated for some period now, since especially they came into Kabul, that women's inclusion is important to them, but exactly how that manifests itself, we still have to see. And I think for the Taliban, overall in the region, we want to support progress in Afghanistan as well. And for them also, for the Taliban, they need to realize that if they really want to untap the potential of their country, then encouraging, not just saying that we will allow women to receive an education, we will allow them to work in the government, but actually encouraging it. This is what is desirable. So at the end of the day, I think that for every country, it's a process. If I talk about my own country, many other developing countries, the journey towards women's empowerment is something ongoing. And the government definitely has a great role to play in that process. People need to be uplifted, their minds need to be, they need to be encouraged to improve the inclusion of women. And in terms of economy, socio-economic progress, everything is tied with that progress we see in the 50% of a country's population. So I think it's going to be a process. The fact that they have said that women will be included in government is obviously welcome, but I hope that that improves and that women can be in the leadership positions in Afghanistan as well.
But as you said, it's a process. We will see. It's a lot will be up to the policies, concrete policies to be mapped out by the new government. So, Professor Zaland, how much do we know about the supreme leader, for example, Akhundzada, and the prime minister who is basically leading this nation, Mohammad Hassan Akhund?
Yes, Haibatullah Akhundzada, I think, in the Taliban ranking, in the Taliban leadership perspective, he is not a madrasa talib, he is a scholar. He is the first scholar that leads the movement. He is highly educated. He has written a lot of books, interpretations to Islamic theology of Quran and Hadith. He is well respected. During the Taliban era, he was Supreme Court head, Chief Justice. He been very much respected as a scholar within the movement for many years, and after the despise of Akhtar Mansour and a big ulama congregation, he was selected as a leader for the movement. And then the new leader, we have Hassan Akhundzada, or Mullah Hassan. He is also known very highly, and he is very much respected within the movement. He was deputy prime minister during the Taliban for the first time after when the cabinet was run by Mullah Rabbani. He was deputy to him. Before being deputy to the Shura-e-Wazira, or the cabinet, he was the governor of Kandahar. He is from Kandahar, well respected. And then he was the last foreign affairs minister after the US invasion, when the government of Taliban was toppled down. He was the last foreign affairs minister. He is well linked with the region leaders also. He knows them in that capacity. During so many years in past, he was actively working on the leadership part. He was member of Rahbari Shura. Now, as leading the cabinet with two deputies, Mr. Mullah Biradar and Mr. Mullah Salam Hanafi, I think these three guys are well experienced, highly respected to run the cabinet and pave the way for a new constitution and new government.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the government, the other makeup, for example, you have Abdul Ghani Barada as the vice deputy leader, deputy prime minister, and you have Muhammad Yaqub, who has been named as a defense minister and the interior minister. This Haqqani network leader, basically Mr. Haqqani, the acting interior minister. What do you make of that? In particular, Barada, he's well known basically because of his engagement with US, with China, with a lot of other countries in a diplomatic position. So what kind of policy do we expect out of this new cabinet?
I think, as I explained, Mr. Hassan, he is going to bring legitimacy, understanding, and also obedience within the Taliban and the country. So he will be used as a domestic figure to compile the whole structure of the new government. And then we have Mullah Biradar and Salam Hanafi, who is second deputy, and he is also very well known and highly linked in with the foreign countries. He was used to be deputy for the political commission in Doha also, speaks English, speaks Urdu, Arabic, Pashto, Dari, and Mullah Biradar himself highly engaged with the political missions around the country, around the world. He visited recently China. He visited so many Central Asian countries, and also several times Moscow, Pakistan. Iran. He is highly engaged in the region. So these two will give the movement, the Taliban new government, regional support, regional perspective, and will ease the Taliban connectivity with the region. And then we have Mullah Yaqub and Sirajuddin Haqqani, I think two very young Taliban leaders, especially Mullah Yaqub. He is very young in his 25th, so 26 years old. He is the son of the late Mullah Muhammad Umar, the first spiritual and the first leader of the movement, highly respected within the movement.
Seems we have a technical issue over there. But anyway, let's move ahead. Professor Mahoney, if you look at the structure, the political structure of the new government, you have a supreme leader, Akhundzada, and then you have a cabinet led by the Prime Minister Akhund over there. So some say, it's kind of similar to the political structure of Iran. What do you make of that? Is that really similar?
It's possible that the Taliban have intentionally imitated Iran and even done so given some shared religious values. But I think it's really, at this point, just a convenient structure that serves many purposes, including keeping the supreme leader insulated, both physically and politically, from the very dangerous circumstances that the Taliban are still facing and trying to consolidate their power and rule and deal with still mounting crises. It's sometimes the case that when we have these revolutions or these culminations of civil wars or these major transitions, that the real leader will kind of stay behind the scenes and let some others go out and absorb those first difficult hits. And then once that danger has passed, or once that initial wave of political leadership has exhausted itself, then to assert and step forward. So it could be an imitation and a desire to institutionally copy what the Iranians are doing. And by the way, other governments do it as well. It's not just an Islamic thing. Or it could be simply dealing with the very difficult conditions that they're facing.
Mm-hmm. Well, Zung, if you look at this, the ministries, for example, you have this counter-narcotics department and also Ministry of Mine and Petroleum, as well as Ministry of Water and Electricity. But there's a Ministry of Health that is absent. So what do you make of that?
Honestly, Chintu, I think, and I think one of the questions that people are asking is, okay, what about the COVID crisis? Health is such an important ministry. But as I said, I think like even your other speakers, they're quite clear that right now these are people that have experience, that are good at problem solving, and they're just here to really pave the way for a lasting setup and consolidating what they have, which we must recognize that for the Taliban, for anyone, this is not a victory. It's really a lot of hard work that needs to go into into forming a government, into encouraging the Afghan society to unite and really push that process forward. Because without the people, obviously the Taliban cannot form a stable government, cannot build towards what any government would desire, which is stable progress, sustainable progress. So I think, I mean, obviously the question of a health ministry is very important. It should be there. I'm sure that it will be there. No country can really be functional without a health ministry, and we're talking about a time when we're going through a global pandemic. But that said, this is a temporary arrangement. This shows the nucleus of what the government will look like, but obviously it will evolve and improve as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me bring in Professor Wang Jin from Northwest University. Wang Jin, if you look at the challenges that the Taliban government faces, it's a range of challenges. But I think if you look at external challenges, for example, but it's related to the composition of the government. For example, some of the figures, for example, Interior Minister and I think the Prime Minister also on the sanction list of the UN or the US. For the Interior Minister, Mr. Haqqani, actually he is also on the FBI most wanted list with a bounty, like some say 10 million on his head. So how does that, complicate this recognition process or, being received by, in particular, the Western countries?
I think it is, as you say, it is a very important problem that will become the very obstacle for the developing ties between the Afghan new government and the world, especially the Western world. Because we look at the names, the prime minister and also the defense minister and also a lot of other very important posts, they are actually on the sanction list, either by United Nations or by United States. So it means that if this government wants to become widely accepted, it has to make the efforts on the one hand to change their traditional image of the international society to make it acceptable for the international society. And on the other hand, they have to try to do and implement the policies that should be widely accepted by the international societies, rather than the very policies similar to the time before 2001, when the policies under the Afghan Taliban were very conservative or even sometimes aggressive. So I think in the future it will become a very difficult task, because if they want to get international assistance, if they want to get the international help, international funds, they are it is very highly necessary for them to improve the ties with the international society. It's very important for themselves to change or transform their traditional image that has been defined by the United Nations or the United States and other west of the world. But I think that is why international society should do something to help them and to encourage their changes, to encourage the process that make the political environment move forward into the stability and the peace back to the country.
Professor Mahoney, obviously this is, closely related to the U.S. stance. Whether the U.S. will accept this government because some of the political figures, as we mentioned, is under sanctions rather. What do you see like the response from the U.S. government?
Well, I think we haven't seen much official response about this, about the individuals named yet, but there's been a lot of discussion in Western media and leading Western media, and we can imagine that that's reflecting a lot of the opinions that you'll see in the White House. But I think the thing that we have to look at here is that, we can make a big deal about specific individuals who have bounties, wanted for multi-million-dollar rewards. But I think we have to remember that the Taliban itself, the whole organization, is designated a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. government. This is a legal designation. It has implications for the U.S. government. It has implications for banks and finance and businesses, media, social media, whether or not certain images or messages can be presented. So at the same time, we had the Trump administration and even to a certain extent the Biden administration working, negotiating, coordinating with the Taliban. So we have this quasi-recognition, quasi-rejection, and I think the U.S. has played this game so far and will continue to play it. They won't have a compelling reason, I think, to recognize, certainly not in the near term, certainly not before the midterm elections, which are going to be very sensitive for Biden, especially given how this has been an imbroglio. So I think that what we're going to continue to see is the U.S. government in a very reactionary position, wagging a finger, pointing a finger, but not really taking a clear stand, just taking a critical one while trying to avoid responsibility for the mess it made.
Professor Wang Jin, if you look at the responses right now, we have, from the big powers, for example, the U.S., China, Russia, mostly the countries are taking very cautious attitudes toward the new government. Basically, some would describe that kind of attitudes as wait and see. So tell us, what are they waiting for?
Because actually, from the perspective of even the external actors, that the new government, according to the Afghan Taliban, it is very interim government. It is not the internal government. It's actually at the beginning process of the political establishment, political reconstruction of the country. And also, according to the names of the new government members, they are just acting prime minister. They are just acting defense minister, acting vice prime minister, or acting the foreign minister. Means everything actually is uncertain. Everything can be changed. And meanwhile, according to the statements that made by Afghan Taliban And yesterday, I mean last night, they declared that maybe more posts and more members of the cabinet will be introduced into the new government in the future. So that means a lot of things as is still can be changed. And so this is a very first step for the Afghanistan to go back to the stability. Because if we want to end the anarchic status of the country, it means we have to get a new government with legal status that's widely accepted, not only inside Afghanistan, but also worldwide. But the first step is that they have to get a new government. So this is the very first step. Maybe there were some problems. For example, they have no female members in this cabinet, and most of the members, nearly everybody, are coming from the Afghan Taliban, and very few of them with the background Uzbek, the branches. But that's okay, because this is the very first step. If we really move forward, a lot of this problem can be solved. But if they just stick to the the conservative stances and go back to the status before 2001, I think that will become the problem that will alarm everybody in the international society. So that's why the great powers, they are very cautious. They encourage this move, the latest developments inside Afghanistan, but also they encourage more developments and more efforts inside Afghan new government, and also hope to become more inclusive and more open to this country to solve every problem in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, Zoom, obviously, there are a lot of challenges if you look ahead for the new government. One of them is really about the economic reconstruction of the nation. One country they are expecting to play a big role is China, under the Belt and Road Initiative, or, for example, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. They can also play a very important role in stabilizing the situation, in helping with economic rebuilding of this nation. What's your idea? What needs to be done, for example, for China to get involved?
I think, of course, in this region, when we talk about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Afghanistan, which is the heart of Asia and which is also the main connection between the SCO countries, between Central Asia and then Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which in the end, Pakistan's vision for CPEC's success is really to be able to build through on Afghanistan towards Central Asia and act as a deep sea port for Central Asian countries. And I think in that sense, because of this basic reality that our potential, which is untapped, is really tied to Afghanistan's circumstances, makes us key stakeholders. We perish when one of our neighbors is suffering, and that is what was the case for Afghanistan for so many years, and that has basically handicapped all of us in a way. So I'll also partially respond to what the previous speaker said about waiting and understanding what kind of government the Taliban will form, that they also have the onus to convince the international community. But at the same time, we can't wait for the Taliban to be perfect in order to start that process of helping them take those basic steps towards stabilization. So for the region, for countries like China, China will be the biggest stakeholders, the biggest partner for Afghanistan as well. The Taliban have communicated that. So for China, for Pakistan, which suffered the most after Afghanistan in the war, Central Asian countries, Iran, Russia, all of us, we have to be the ones obviously encouraging a positive process in Afghanistan, and at the same time ensuring that they have that basic stability to be able to form a stable government, to be able to keep the society at peace, to be able to realize that these Western governments that are encouraging people to just leave the country, this is not a solution for us, the region, and especially it's not the solution for Afghanistan. But they will stay when overall they have basic things in place, when they see a promise, when they see that the region is supporting them. So overall, let's talk about the Belt and Road Vision, the Shanghai spirit. The concept is that we are all connected. We don't want to impose anything on Afghanistan. We obviously don't agree with those ideas that apparently the Americans were trying to do state building in Afghanistan. But at the same time, we realize that environment that is conducive to positive domestic development is something that we also share, and we also have the responsibility to create. So this is one thing to understand. And obviously, the real focus, the real vision of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Belt and Road is that we build enough connectivity through trade, through people-to-people contacts, through greater cultural cooperation. We can create a community of countries, and Afghanistan will be the heart of this community, the center of this region.
Very encouraging idea, obviously. Thank you, Zoom. Well, on that note, we are concluding today's show. Many thanks again to our guests, and thank you for watching. See you next time.